Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our supported decision-making training series for our June session. My name is Vicki Suter. I'm the Director of Rights and Advocacy, also our liaison related to supported decision-making here at OCHN. Next slide.
I will just kick us off with a bit of housekeeping here. So today's training has been approved for one social work CEU. If you are in need of that social work CEU, you will need to be on the training the entire time and fill out the evaluation that will be sent out in the chat at the end of the training. Even if you need an attendance certificate, you will need to fill out that evaluation as well. Anyone not filling out the evaluation will not receive a certificate. And again, that will be sent out in the chat at the end of the training. So let's talk about how to get to the chat. So depending on what version of Teams you have, you're going to have kind of a toolbar on either the top or the bottom of your screen. The chat box is a little bubble with two lines through it. You may have to look for it in your settings as well. So you'll go to the three dots and look there. It might say show conversation. So if you haven't navigated to the chat already, please just take some time to look for that. We'll be putting some information in there as well as the evaluation, and you are more than welcome to ask any questions there in the chat as well. Next to the chat box is a little smiley face with a hand next to it. That is a reaction button. That is how you can raise your hand. If you have any questions, depending on how we are rolling with time, this is kind of a rather full training today, so we may save questions till the end. So again, you can always put those in the chat so you do not forget them, and I will be monitoring the chat throughout the training. To the right of those, there is a little camera and a mic image. If there is a slash through it, that means your camera and mic is off. We do ask you to keep your mic muted throughout the training, just so it cuts down on background noise. If we do pause for questions, then of course you can unmute yourself then. It is totally up to you if you choose to have your camera on today. We do love to see your smiling faces, but that is a personal choice. Just be mindful that if you do have your camera on, we can see everything that happens in the background. I also wanted to mention that today's training is being recorded and will be available on our public website at a later date. And I will drop where to find those recordings in the chat, and you can also find all of our past recordings of these supported decision-making sessions. So that wraps up my housekeeping for today. Thank you.
Thanks, Galen. So again, welcome to our training. This is number 5 of our 9-part series for 2022. So thank you for attending and joining us. We want to thank our partners who are helped us put together this series and put it on. And that certainly is Mary Sheehan-Woogard from the Michigan Development Disabilities Council. I think I got that right, Mary. She was very instrumental in making sure that we have the really excellent presenters for each of these sessions and helping us develop our topics. And then also Kimberly Hoga from Detroit Wayne Integrated Health Networks helping us get the word out. So all of the persons that in our Southeast Michigan area that want to participate in these trainings are able to do that. Supported decision making and making sure that individuals are aware of what that is and how they might use it is a goal of the local OCHN supported decision making work group. And they're the ones that came up with this idea of this training series. Also, we are a part of the statewide supported decision-making work group and are working on various efforts related to that as well. All right, next slide. We want to spend as much time as we can in our session today because our topic is the intersection of employment and public benefits. Can I work and keep my public benefits? That's always a big question and a big concern for individuals when they want to work and earn a paycheck. So our presenter today is Kathy Ray. She's the She's the project coordinator from the ARC of Michigan. She's an excellent presenter, full of knowledge, and she probably could answer just about any question that you have today. So I'm excited that Kathy's with us, and I'm just going to let her take it over and impart us with her wisdom. Are you with us, Kathy? Ooh, we lost her.
Yeah, I do not see her on the attendance list as of present.
Yeah, she was. She must have. I said all those nice things about her. She didn't even get to hear all that good stuff.
Well, I do know she was on momentarily.
Yeah, she
I
was.
saw her.
Yes.
And I do know she was not having internet problems earlier. We
Yes.
just, so while we're waiting for her to sign back on,
Sure.
I will tell you why she was later than normal to get here. We were interviewing for supported decision-making youth ambassadors. And so we were both in the interview process. Michigan received a grant, a federal grant from the Civic, which is Youth Choice, Youth Voice. And we will have 4 youth ambassadors as soon as we complete the interviews later on this evening. And they will be selected and they'll be getting ready soon to start work. And they will do training throughout the summer. And then they will be also available to do presentations regarding supported decision making, particularly to youth in areas of our state. So we hope following the completion of their training, they're going to be available to get into schools and other areas where youth with disabilities are, where they hang out, and be able to really kind of get this information moving upstream to younger and younger audiences. I see Kathy's back on now, so I think she's ready to get going.
Kathy, you missed all the great things I said about you. See if she can.
I'm sorry. At the very beginning, I lost my internet and oh joy, right?
Yeah, no worries. I just know that I said lots of great things about you and they're expecting a wonderful presentation.
All right. Well, my apologies, everyone. I am Kathy McCrae, the project coordinator for the ARC Michigan, and I do work incentives planning and assistance as one of the projects that I coordinate. And so that's what we're going to talk about today is the benefits to employment. Next slide, please. So our topics today are going to be, we're going to talk a little bit about the definition of disability from the Social Security Administration side, a little bit about Ssdi, SSI, Medicare, Medicaid, a great Medicaid program for people with disabilities who are working called Freedom to Work. And then we're going to touch on just a little bit about achieving a better life experience accounts, ABLE accounts. Next slide, please. So when you are under the age of 18, there is a definition of disability that includes a determinable physical or mental impairment, which results in, and this is the key term, marked and severe functional limitations, which is expected to last at least a year or result in death. Next slide, please. That changes when you're over the age of 18. Instead of the marked and severe functional limitation, they put in that you have an inability to engage in substantial gainful activity due to the medically determinable physical or mental impairment, which is expected to result in death or to last for at least 12 months. So that is the key difference between the under 18 definition of disability and the over 18 definition of disability. And so that substantial gainful activity can be a couple of different things, but primarily it is a number that is set by Social Security, and it changes almost every year. And it's the amount of money that a person earns in a month, gross income. And we're going to talk about what that is, what substantial gainful activity is, as we move forward. Next slide, please. So it's, like I said, it's based on your countable gross earnings. And this year, in 2022, unless your disability is blindness, the substantial gainful activity level is $1,350 per month. For folks who have blindness as their Social Security disability designation, that amount is actually $2,260 per month. And again, that's gross income, so before taxes. When you apply for disability benefits, if you're engaging in substantial gainful activity work that pays that amount at the time that you apply, you will not be found eligible. So if you have a disability that's, say, progressive, or you know that you're going in for treatments or surgeries that are going to result in disability that's going to last for more than 12 months, you need to wait to apply for disability benefits until after you stop engaging in substantial gainful activity. Next slide, please. So Social Security looks at money in two different ways. It looks at money that you earn from employment or self-employment, and money that is unearned, which is just about everything else. It can be annuities, it can be stocks, it can be other Social Security disability benefits would be included in unearned income. So that's important to keep in mind, the two ways that Social Security looks at money: earned and unearned. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk about the two different sides of Social Security disability benefits. Social Security disability insurance, also known as Ssdi, and supplemental security income, also known as SSI. Social Security disability insurance provides a cash benefit. It provides a medical benefit, and that medical benefit is Medicare. Eligibility for that program is based on someone's work history. Ssdi only looks at earned income. It does not care about unearned income. And Ssdi has no resource or asset limits. So you can own, 3 McMansions, and Ssdi doesn't care about that. You can have $100,000 in the bank, and Ssdi doesn't care about that. On the SSI side, again, you get a cash benefit. You get a medical benefit, and that medical benefit is Medicaid. Eligibility is based on economic need. So basically, if you're low income enough, you can qualify for SSI. It counts earned and unearned income. So they count everything. Every dollar that comes into you is going to be counted as income for SSI. And it does have resource or asset limits. Next slide, please. So we're going to start on the Ssdi side of things. So again, this is an insurance program that's based on someone's work history. In order to receive Ssdi with your name on the check, you have to be over 18 years of age. When you apply and are found eligible, there's a 5-month wait for the cash benefits to start. And when you get Ssdi, you either get the full check or you get no check at all. So if you start working, your check does not get reduced by a certain amount. You just are getting the check because you're not making SGA, or you stop getting the check because you're earning at the SGA level, the substantial gainful activity level. And it's been long enough that you've been doing that you are no longer qualifying for those benefits. There's a 24-month wait for Medicare once you're found eligible for Ssdi. Next slide, please. So this is payable again to a worker and sometimes to a family member who's insured under the Federal Insurance Contribution Act, or what we know as FICA. To be insured, the worker has to have sufficient work activity within a certain period of time. And the worker or family member must have a qualifying disability. So they have this whole list of various kinds of conditions that qualify as disability for Social Security's purposes. Next slide, please. So this is how Ssdi looks at whether or not you've got enough work to be covered by Ssdi. If you are over 31 years of age, then you have to have at least 20 quarters in the last 10 years where your gross earnings have been at least $1,510. If you're under 24 years of age, you only need to have 6 quarters of coverage in the last 3 years to be fully insured. And then between those ages, the number of quarters that you need to be fully insured varies. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, Ssdi can cover the worker, but it can also cover family members. And one of the family members that it covers are folks who are called childhood disability beneficiaries. This used to be called disabled adult child benefits. And in Michigan, we do still use the term DAC, disabled adult child, for Medicaid purposes. But in Social Security parlance, that's childhood disability benefit. So this is an individual who is unmarried, that is important, who is 18 or over, and whose disability began before the age of 22. They can collect on a parent's work record if the parent is getting disability benefits or is getting retirement benefits, or if that parent has passed away. Next slide, please. In some instances, a widower can also receive someone's benefit based on their spouse's work record. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but they have to have a qualifying disability, have to be at least age 50, and have to have been married within a set period of time to that worker. Next slide, please. So I want to talk about some of the incentives that Ssdi has to encourage people to try work. Both Ssdi and SSI have work incentives. Some of them are very much the same, they're very similar, but they are not the same. They get applied somewhat differently. Next slide, please. So with Ssdi, the first work incentives that we see are called timed work incentives. And the biggest one is the trial work period. So the trial work period is just what it sounds like it is. It's an opportunity for someone to try work and to figure out how much work they can sustain. So it's 9 months in a rolling 5-year window. So if we were looking at somebody's work record today, June 28th of 2022, we would look back to June 29th of 2017. So we'd be looking at a 5-year window. And if they had 9 months during which they met the trial work period monetary standard during that 5 years, then they would be done with their trial work period. So the trial work period begins at $970 gross earnings per month. So if you're earning $800 per month and you're getting Ssdi, you are not working at the trial work period level, and it's not going to count against you. You're not going to lose your benefit or be at risk of losing your benefit at that earning level. At $970 a month, then they start counting those 9 trial work period months. They don't all have to be worked in a row. Like I said, they're going to look for 9 months within a 5-year window. During that time, you can earn more than $970 a month. So you can be earning $2,000 a month. If you haven't used up your trial work period, that is still a trial work period month, and you will still continue to get your Ssdi check during that time. Next slide, please. So the next time period that we're looking at in terms of work incentives for Ssdi is the extended period of eligibility. The extended period of eligibility is 3 years, and it starts with the month after your trial work period ends. So you've used up those 9 months, and that next month, you're going to start the extended period of eligibility. During that time, if your earnings are below the substantial gainful activity level, you will get a benefit check. If your earnings are above the substantial gainful activity level, you will not get a benefit check for that month. And then another timed work incentive that Ssdi has is expedited reinstatement. So let's say you've used up your trial work period, and then you went on to earn at the substantial gainful activity level, and your benefits were ceased due to work. You have 5 years from the time that your case is closed due to work activity to file for expedited reinstatement. So let's say you're working, you're doing fine, and then, 3 years from the end of your trial work period, you find that you can no longer sustain that same level of work activity, and you need to either go down below substantial gainful activity because you can only work a couple of days a week, or you can no longer work at all. But you've lost your Ssdi. Oh, but you can file for expedited reinstatement. And what happens with that is your benefits are immediately reinstated, and then they do what they call a continuing disability review. So they're looking to see if you still have that underlying disability. If you do, then your benefits will continue. If for some reason they find that you do not, you can appeal that. But even if ultimately they find that you no longer have that disability, they're not going to penalize you for the time that they gave you the benefits during that EXR. So they hold you harmless for that. And then if you've gotten EXR for 2 years, then your work incentives, like the trial work period, start again. So you get a second bite at the apple, so to speak. Next slide, please. Okay, impairment-related work activities. Impairment-related work activities, or impairment-related work expenses are reasonable expenses that you pay out of pocket and that are both for your disability and for work. So an example I often use is, let's say you have to have a lift in one of your shoes in order to be able to stand on your feet all day to do your job. That is both related to your disability and to your needs for work. That would be considered an impairment-related work expense. But let's say that you're working at McDonald's and you have to pay for your uniform, or you have to pay to have your uniform cleaned. That is a work expense, but it's not related to your disability, so it would not count as an impairment-related work expense. The question that always comes up about impairment-related work expenses that I want to address right away is whether or not transportation can be used. And the answer is sometimes, but Social Security is very strict about that. So if you have public transportation in your area, you will probably not get an impairment-related work expense for transportation. If you don't, then you can go ahead and try. But with transportation, as with all impairment-related work expenses, they have to get approved by Social Security. Subsidy and special condition is another kind of work incentive that I think is really underutilized. And this is where a person receives supports or extra help on the job in order to be able to perform their job, but they're paid at the same rate that somebody who does not receive that extra help is paid. So we've got two people working at the Amazon warehouse. They're both making $15 an hour, but one person gets extra support in terms of extra supervision, or is allowed to take extra breaks because their disability requires that. But they're making the same amount as all of their coworkers. That person is getting subsidy and special condition. And that can result in a percentage decrease in the amount of countable earnings that get applied to them. A couple of others that I'm not going to go into deeply, but I just wanted to point out are the unsuccessful work attempt and income averaging. Next slide, please. I'm sorry, that is on the next slide. So let's go ahead and move on to the next slide because I did cover that. So this is how they calculate countable income for SSDI. And they take your monthly gross earnings. So in this case, we have somebody who's earning $1,700 a month. Then you get an SSA approved IRWI, let's say for $50. They take that off. So now you have $1,650. And then this person is also approved for a 20% subsidy and special condition. So now they're going to take off $330. And we have somebody whose earnings are now below substantial gainful activity at $1,320. Okay, I'm going to stop and just quickly take some questions if there are any about SSDI before I move on to SSI.
We do have one question in the chat that I will read. Emily had asked, are SSDI work incentives available to DACs?
Yes, yes, they are.
All right, that was our only question in the chat. I will give everyone just a moment. Perfect. Looks like we have a hand up. So Jim, did you have a question? I saw your hand did go down.
I don't know if you can hear me. I just want to know if we're going to get access to a copy of these slides.
Vicki, any input on that if we're available to?
That's up to Kathy. Those are that's her document.
You guys can totally have a copy of that. So
thank you.
Okay, fabulous. So what I will do is I will send a PDF of the slides out with certificates. So even if you don't need a certificate, please ask for an attendance certificate at least, so I can send that out and attach these slides. Or you can always follow up with me via the login email and request those there. Barbara, your hand is up.
Yes, I just had a question. If there's anything related to educational or educational expenses, if you're on SSDI. My son's trying to take community college classes, so I just wondered if there's any allowance for that.
So there is a program called PASS, where you can set aside money for a specific goal that's employment related. So if he was going to go to college, for example, to become a certified nursing assistant, that would be a specific job employment goal, and he could set aside money in a PASS program. What that would do is potentially make him eligible to receive SSI in addition to SSDI, and bring him up to at least the SSI level. But that's the only sort of education related thing that's available for SSDI.
Okay, he's been on SSI and he's just transitioning, or he just got eligible for SSDI through work credit, so it's very confusing. I couldn't figure out if the PASS program would apply to him or not.
Yep, it would.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, so are we ready to move on to SSI, or did we have?
We've just one more quick question in the chat. So does a retiree's child automatically start receiving SSDI, or do they have to apply? And then they clarified that this retiree's child does have a developmental disability.
If they were receiving SSI at the time the person retired, then Social Security will automatically move them to SSDI. If they were not, then yes, they would have to apply. Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and go on to SSI. So next slide, please. So supplemental security income, as I said, is based on economic need plus disability, or that the person is over the age of 65. You get a specific cash benefit that's called the federal benefit rate. This year, the federal benefit rate for an individual is $841 per month. For a married couple who are both SSI eligible, the monthly amount is $1,261 a month. As I said, it comes with Medicaid, and that Medicaid starts immediately. There is no waiting period. They do have an asset or resource limit, which is $2,000 for an individual, $3,000 for a married eligible couple. Resources do not include one home if you live in it. You can own a home, but you have to live in it. One vehicle that is used for your transportation. And then the furnishings of your home, your clothing, things like that. Personal jewelry is acceptable, but if you look like Mr. T and you've got gold chains hanging all over the place, they're going to start counting some of that as assets. Cash benefits reduce with income. So that $841 will get reduced somewhat by the amount of earnings that you get from work. And I'll talk more about how that happens as we move forward here. If the person receiving SSI is living in the home of someone else, for example, a parent, and they are not paying their fair share of the housing costs and the food costs, they will have their benefit reduced by 1/3. This is called the Vtr reduction. And so this year that would take them down to $561 per month. What I always tell parents is set up a letter. It doesn't have to be a rental agreement, because I don't want you to become a landlord and have to declare that as income, but you can set up a letter to have the child or the person living with you pay their fair share of the housing and food costs. And then if you don't need that money, or you feel bad about taking money from your kid, or whatever the reason might be, you can take that money and put it into an ABLE account for them. And then the state does provide a supplement. It's $42 per quarter, so every 3 months. Very exciting amount of money, I know. Let's move to the next slide. So supplemental security income is payable to disabled adults and to children who have limited economic resources. For folks who are under the age of 18, their parents have to be low income. But once you turn 18, they're going to do a redetermination if you were receiving SSI as a child. If not, you'll apply at the age of 18. And then you have to meet the adult definition of disability. And they are no longer going to be looking at the parent's income. They're only going to be looking at that individual's income. And then again, if you're living with another person and you're not paying the shelter costs, you're going to receive the 1/3 reduction. And this is, SSI is also payable, as I said, to folks over the age of 65 who are low income, regardless of whether or not they have a disability. This is a program that's funded with general tax dollars, as opposed to that insurance that's pulled out of your paycheck under FICA. Next slide, please. So SSI comes with its own set of work incentives. The first work incentive is the general income exclusion. This is $20 that gets taken right off the top. So it's the first $20 of unearned income. So if grandma gave you a gift for Christmas or whatever, if there's no unearned income, then they take that $20 off your earned income. The next incentive is the earned income exclusion. So they take $65 off of the first amount that you earn. And then they divide your earnings from work by 2. And that's the amount that they will reduce your SSI check by. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry. Things are getting in the way of my computer. Okay, there we go. So here we have an example of somebody who is working 25 hours a week. They're making minimum wage. They're only getting SSI. They're not getting any SSDI. So we've got them at $1,071 approximately of earnings, gross earnings per month. So they're going to take that $20 general income exclusion off the top of that. Then they're going to take $65 off the remainder. So that leaves us with $936. Is that what that says? Sorry, let me put on my glasses so I can read. How about that? $986. And then they take $986, they divide that by 2. That's going to leave us with a total countable earned income of $493. Now, some people are going to look at that and say, well, it's not even worth going to work. But let's add this up. Let's take a minute and add this up. So we have the federal benefit rate of $841. We're going to subtract $493 in countable income from that. That gives us an adjusted SSI payment of $348. But this person has earnings of $1,071. So when we add the SSI payment to the amount of earnings that the individual has, their total financial outcome is now $1,419. So even though they have a reduced SSI check, they're still coming out financially ahead by $578. And even when you take taxes off of that, they're still going to come out ahead. Next slide, please. Some people are what they call dual beneficiaries. They get SSDI and SSI. And the way that this usually happens is that their SSDI amount is lower than the federal benefit rate. And so SSI then steps in and gives them enough SSI to bring them up to the federal benefit rate. So here's an example of that happening. We have somebody who's getting $650 in SSDI. They take the general income exclusion off of that $20. So they have countable unearned income of $630. Then we have the federal benefit rate, which is $841. They subtract the unearned income from that amount, leaving them with an SSI check of $211. So this person is getting SSDI for $650, SSI for $211 for a total benefit of $861. All of the income counting and resource counting rules for both of the programs have to be applied to this person moving forward. So we have to consider all of those rules and policies as we go forward with advising this individual. Next slide, please. So briefly, this is a person who gets SSI and SSDI. And as you can see up at the top, they're getting unearned income, so their SSDI of $400. We're popping that general income exclusion right off the top of that for leaving us $380 in countable unearned income. This person's working 20 hours a week at minimum wage, so they've got $857 of gross earned income. We take the earned income exclusion off of that, leaving us with $792. We divide that by 2. We now have countable earned income of $396. So we're going to add those two things together, $380 of unearned income, $396 of countable earned income, for total countable income of $776. That gets subtracted from that federal benefit rate of $841. It's going to leave this person with an SSI check of $65. So before working, this person received $861 in total benefits. But after working, this person now has a total financial outcome of $1,322. So even though their SSI check has been reduced to $65, they're still ending up $461 ahead.
Kathy, this is Vicki. Can I ask you a question?
You sure can.
I think you know, sometimes people might have concern. Okay, yeah, I'm working, and that's fine. But you know, sometimes my health causes me not to work, or maybe my disability or my health progresses where then I can no longer work. So how easy is it to get your benefits back up to the maximum if you're not working?
Right. So both SSI and SSDI come with expedited reinstatement. So if you suddenly stop working, you can go into the Social Security office, let them know that you're requesting expedited reinstatement, and have your full benefits turned right back on again. So it should be pretty much immediate.
Okay, thanks. There's a couple questions in the chat.
Go ahead.
Can a parent put the money their child pays them in rent into a third-party special needs trust?
Yes.
Okay. And then another question on rent money. I bought a second to die insurance and pay for it from rent. Would SSI allow me to stop the insurance and put the money away in the ABLE account?
I'm not sure. It would depend on the terms of the insurance. If you're, and it would also probably depend on how fast you could turn it around. Mm-hmm. So usually what happens with countable resources for SSI is that they look at the end of the month. So at the end of any calendar month, not 30 days, but the actual, the 30th or the 31st of the month, they're going to look at what your bank account is at that point. And if you have more than $2,000 in the account at that time, then that'll be counted as a resource. So if you were able to, for the individual, turn that around before the end of within a calendar month, then it would not be counted as a resource.
Yeah, and it's not like 200,000 or 22,000-ish, because I did hear of a situation where somebody had, like, say, $2,010, and that caused them some problems.
Yep, it's anything over $1,000. So you don't want it to be $2,000 and 50 cents. You want it to be $19.99.
Okay. And then there's another question. How long is the expedited reinstatement time period after a person starts working?
So expedited reinstatement happens when the individual loses their benefit because of work, and then they have 5 years from the time that they lost their benefit because of work. Okay?
Okay.
All right, so we're going to move on to the next slide here real quick. And I'm just going to run through some of the SSI impairment-related work expenses. We have the expedited reinstatement that we've already been talking about. Property essential to self-support. So this is something, oh, did I miss one? I'm sorry, I did. I apologize, I skipped to my own other slide. Impairment-related work expenses, they're very much the same as Ssdi. They're things that you pay for out of pocket related to both work and your disability. Blind work expenses apply to SSI. Blind work expenses are any work-related expense. So remember I talked about that uniform? That would count as a blind work expense. It doesn't count as an IRWI, but it will count as a blind work expense. And then this is a great one, the student earned income exclusion. So if you're under the age of 22, you're regularly attending school, you can exclude up to $2,040 a month in earnings from work, with a yearly cap of $8,300 or $8,230. So that is a great benefit for young people who are working, and a great opportunity to get young people to try work. Okay, next slide. Again, we have that EXR. We've been talking about the expedited reinstatement. Property essential to self-support is something that you own that would normally be counted as an asset, but because you're using it for work, it can be set aside and not counted as a resource or an asset. And then we talked a little bit about this during our question time, plans for achieving self-support. So it has to be related to a work goal. You can set money aside from your Ssdi or from work that you're doing into a special account to go towards that work goal. Then that money is not a countable resource, and it can reduce the amount of income, that unearned income that you have, so that you can qualify for a higher rate of SSI. Okay. I know we're running out of time, so I'm real quickly going to run through medical benefits. So if we can go to the next slide and then the next slide. So there are two sides. There's Medicare and there's Medicaid. Ssdi comes with Medicare. You get coverage after 24 months. Part A covers hospitalization. B, medical providers, which is like doctors and nurses. Part D covers prescriptions. There are no resource limits with Medicaid, no asset limits. SSI comes with Medicaid. It starts the same month as your eligibility for SSI. It covers hospitalization, medical providers, prescription. There is an asset limit, again, just like with SSI, $2,000 for a single person, $3,000 for a couple. Next slide. If you're a dual beneficiary, you might be getting both Medicare and Medicaid. All the rules apply, so that's important to keep track of. Medicare is a federal program. It's managed by the federal government. You will get the same Medicare in Michigan, Ohio, California, Hawaii. It's exactly the same everywhere. If you lose your Ssdi, you're going to get Medicare as long as you're getting Ssdi. If you lose your Ssdi due to work, you will have Medicare Part A for free for at least 93 months after the end of your trial work period. You will have to pay out of pocket for your Part B and your Part D during that time. Next slide. Medicaid is a federal program that's administered by the states. It is different in every single state in the union. In Michigan, as long as you are receiving an SSI check, you will be receiving Medicaid. We are also what's called a 1619B state. So in Michigan, Medicaid will continue as long as you've received at least 1 month of SSI. You still meet the disability requirement and all the other SSI requirements, like your resources are low, and you have gross earnings below the state threshold. This year, that state threshold is $3,356 a month, or $40,275 annual earnings. Next slide, please. I'm not going to go into all the stuff about freedom to work eligibility. Let me just suffice it to say that this is a wonderful program for people who have a disability and are working. You don't have to be working a specific amount. You can be working, 1 hour a week and you're working. But it allows you to put aside more money in savings. You can have up to $75,000 in savings. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide. You can have up to $75,000 in savings, an unlimited retirement account, so a 401k or an IRA. You will have to pay a premium for freedom to work if your your modified adjusted gross income is over 138% of the federal poverty level. The premium rate is 2.5%. So if you were earning, say, $3,000 a month, that was your modified adjusted gross income, then your premium would be $75 a month, which is the best insurance you can buy for $75 a month. Savings that you accrue while you're on the Freedom to Work program will be held harmless for returning to other Medicaid programs. So if you stop working and you go back to standard disability Medicaid, that money that you've put away while you were on Freedom to Work will not be counted as a resource. Next slide, please. An important thing to remember is that any decision made by SSA is appealable. Look at those letters, keep those letters, make a folder. The time frame for the appeal will be given in the decision letter. All right, do you have any questions about Medicaid, Medicare, healthcare?
There was a question about SSDI. If for the reasons such as marital status, you can get SSDI, can you switch back to SSI? I mean, can you not get SSDI? Can you switch to SSI?
If you're found eligible for SSDI, you cannot go back. You cannot go back to SSI unless for some reason you lose your SSDI.
It looks like we.
Barbara, you've had your hand up. Did you have a question?
Yes, sorry, real quick. The SSDI, you get Medicare after 24 months. Do you have to apply for that or do they do it automatically?
It starts automatically after 24 months.
Great. And one quick question about the educational stuff again, there was a student earned income exclusion and also the PASS program we talked about before. Mm-hmm. Nobody's ever told me about that from Social Security. Do you know how to actually get it?
Yeah, give me a call.
Okay, thanks.
Drop me an email and we'll chat about that.
Okay.
All right. Is that it on the questions?
Yes.
Okay. Real quickly, just going to go through the Achieving a Better Life Experience Act. You can find out more about this on their website, which is savewithable.com. So if the individual's disability onset was before the age of 26, then they can save up to $100,000 in an ABLE account, which will not be counted as a resource for Medicaid purposes. Now they can only do that in $16,000 a year increments, because 16,000 is the yearly contribution limit for ABLE accounts, and you're only allowed to have one ABLE account. These are a great way to save for folks who have disabilities, and you can spend this money on anything that is a qualified disability expense, and they are very broad in their definition of what is a qualified disability expense, and that includes rent and food. So this is a way of making sure that somebody who's living on SSI, which frankly is not enough to pay for rent and food in this state, can have enough money to pay for rent and food, because they can pay for that out of their ABLE account without it causing them to be dinged with the VTR or in-kind support and maintenance. There is a Medicaid payback from ABLE accounts upon the individual's death. And I think that's it. The next slide is some resources. And then the next slide shows the Michigan Work Incentives Planning and Assistance Projects. If you contact these folks, they can help you with many of the things that I have just talked to you about. And my number is on there as well, the ARC Michigan WIPA. And my contact information is there. So if you do have questions going forward about this, I'm happy to chat with you. I'm so sorry we ran out of time because I had trouble getting signed in with my internet. I apologize.
No worries, Kathy. That was excellent. So yeah, just keep that slide up for a second, Caitlin. I just want to point out the yellow one, that UCP. So some of you might know Paul Landry. I believe Paul Landry is the WIPA person. Is that right, Kathy? Or
yep, actually the area is where Paul, well, actually, no, I apologize. Paul is no longer doing WIPA. It's Kendall Brooke who is doing WIPA for UCP right now.
Okay. So I do know there's people at UCP who are very knowledgeable about SSI, Ssdi, and work programs. Because one of my questions that I was thinking of, Kathy, when you're presenting is like, okay, this is a lot. This is a lot of information. It's kind of complicated. And so, you know, where can people go to get assistance? So I'm thinking there's probably people at our core provider agencies who are, I don't know what they would call them, but sort of like employment assistant folks who have some knowledge about some of this. And then also probably the Michigan ARC as well as our local ARCs. Would you think, Kathy?
Yes, I mean, and if they don't know, they will direct you to me. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because yeah, it's a little complicated.
It's extremely complicated. And the main thing that I want people to realize at the end of the day is that A, there are people to help with this, and B, work is an option for people with disabilities. A lot of people think that that can't happen because they're going to lose their benefits, and there are ways to work with these programs.
Well, I really like those slides where you showed, even though when they're working and they might lose some of their benefits, they still end up with more money than they would have if they just had straight Social Security, SSI or SSDI.
Correct.
That was very interesting. I really like that piece. Thank you, Kathy. That was awesome.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yes. All right. Next slide. We're just going to do some wrap up here. So I think we did our questions as we went. Next slide, or a reminder. So if you want CEUs, you have to complete the survey. Even if you want the copy of these slides, please complete the survey. It asks you for your emails to be sure we can get you your certificates, CEUs, as well as a copy of the slides. Next, and Caitlin's put a link for the survey in the chat. I just want to remind you of our next upcoming series. So in July, we have using supported decision making in medical situations. That's another area where folks are very concerned that they will not be able to assist their family member or loved one regarding medical situations. So we'll have a presentation about that. August is on types of assistive technology that can help people have inclusion and interdependence. September is supporting people through the guardianship termination process. In October, the state supported decision-making work group has been working on a toolkit that's putting all these different tools and resources into a toolkit. We hope to have that done and be able to present that in October. Next slide. As we mentioned, we do have these recordings on our website. It's www.oaklandchn.org. Click on resources, recorded training, scroll down the supported decision-making webinar series. You will see our series from 2021 as well as 2022. And last year's those sessions were an hour and a half. This year they're all 1 hour. Okay, next slide. Thank you for attending our training. We so much appreciate it. Oh my goodness, we ended right at 2 o'clock. How about that? So just a reminder, please complete the survey and let us know if you have any other questions or concerns. Other than that, thank you so much for joining us today.